Welcome to the first episode of the Invisible Friction podcast. My name is Anna Ahrenfelt, and by my side I have Mårten Stenfors. Mårten, do you remember when a few months ago, asked you what was the hardest problem you had as an executive?
Yeah, I do remember. And it's something that doesn't leave me. And it was that for 25, 30 years, travel around the world to fix things. But it occurred to me that we just put Band-Aids on the wounds. We didn't heal the actual cause. We just patched it up and continued. And then the Band-Aid fell off and we were back in the same situation again.
Okay, yeah. And we will talk more about that. But before we go deeper into that, I think we should just briefly introduce ourselves to the listeners and perhaps explain why the two of us are having this conversation. You have spent more than 25 years leading complex organizations from the inside with responsibility for performance, transformation, and people. What perspective has that given you?
Wow. As you said, I have spent the last 25, 30 years of my career working for large global organizations, traveling around the world. And one of my tasks in those companies have been to improve performance and quality and lead change through that. And it has been quite a challenge. Some problems kept returning. And despite having very good people, very good ambition, but we kept on coming back to the same old again. So we used to say, like they say in Vietnam, same, but different. So I think I bring the experience that I have been there, seen it, done it. I know what it's like. I have felt the pain. I know what it's like when you go in and try to change something and you think, yes, this works. And then you leave, you come home, and then all of a sudden you get the phone call and you're back at the beginning again. And so it never really works as intended. And it frustrated me quite a bit.
And I come from the other side. I have spent 20 years working alongside leaders like you, an organization with change management, leadership, and organizational development. And over time, I have been more and more convinced that we need to start see and act as organizations are living systems. And to understand them, we need more reflection so we start seeing the patterns and really understand how this organization works and why we get the results that we get. And that is often difficult to see when you are inside and in the middle of where everything is happening. So you could say that you, Mårten, you bring the inside perspective and I bring the outside perspective.
Yes, I think that's a very good way of putting it. And I wish we had met and worked together much, much earlier in my career, because that would have made my life less frustrating when it comes to change and driving change. So together...
Yeah, and I would have loved working with you because it's not easy to find clients that share this view on organizations that we do.
There is a very interesting stigma out there that if you show weakness or share that you're failing, that you're not a good leader. But then when we start to show the results, it actually came through that I had good intention, even though I perhaps used different methods. But we cannot change that. So instead, what we did, we took all this knowledge and we wrote a book called The Invisible Friction. And now you are listening to the podcast with the same name. And we're not going to give you any quick answers. I had a message on LinkedIn yesterday saying, okay, so tell me what the most common frictions are within the high-tech business. And it's not for us to tell people what the frictions are. It's for you to identify and find out how you can identify what questions you need to ask yourself and your organization to explore what your frictions are.
Yeah. We need a question that helps us to see what's maybe happening beneath what we first see. It's that's the challenge to keep on asking questions. But let's go back to where we started. Can you take us into a specific situation where the same problem kept coming back, even though you thought that you had solved it and you traveled back home again?
I think the most recent one comes from my latest corporate stint where I led the health and safety and food safety and quality assurance for a huge global organization. And we had so many people getting injured on a daily basis. I mean, in the area where I was in charge, there were over 140,000 employees. So quite a few people to keep track of and make sure that they stay healthy and safe. And a lot of them, they knew the processes, they knew the rules, they knew the guidelines that they had to follow, but we kept on having injured people because, and I call it complacency, because they have done it, right? They have cooked or fried these French fries for 20 years. Not the same, of course. They new batches each time.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. But they know how to do it, they think, right? So all of a sudden they're like, I know how this works. I don't need this glove. I don't need this hairnet. I don't need these safety shoes. And somebody slips, somebody trips on the edge of a mat in the kitchen all the time. And they think, oh, it's just how it is. And we say, no, you need to change it. And then they came back to, no, this is easy. This is how I've done it. You know, I've done this for 20 years. I know how it's done. So changing the mind of a human being to do something differently was very, very difficult because we kept on having the same injuries, slip, trips and falls, burns and cuts. And it's the same thing. You have a cut glove. You're supposed to have a cut glove on so you don't cut your finger off. But when you're in the heat of the moment to chop up some lettuce or cucumbers, you forget that one. So we had to do something very differently for people to understand that this is important. It's not us coming up with rules for you to have a rule to follow. We actually care about you keeping your finger and not cutting it off or burning your leg with deep fried oil because you haven't done the proper procedure. And I come from a culture where we openly share and talk about things. But when we started talking about this to our employees here in North America, I recognized that there was fear of punishment, fear of retaliation, and fear of me looking bad, or fear of me being told that I didn't do anything that was right, or that I do something that was wrong. So people didn't dare to report things because they thought that they would get punished for almost causing an accident. So
That's a very good example of that you really need to learn this system because you came from another culture and another environment where it was okay to tell when something went wrong. And if you then just say to people, you have to tell when something nearly happens, and you make all these routines and they have to fill in this blanket, everything that we try to do to collect that information. But if it's fear underneath, then we will never solve the problem.
And there is sadly, and identifying the fear is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Because people don't speak up about fear out of fear.
No, exactly.
Which is kind of a really, really strange thing. But this, sadly, my experience, which I struggled with when I came to US, was the culture that people were so scared of losing their jobs and that you are in a position where you are hired at will, so they can fire you for anything without any reason, pretty much, which is not the way where we come from. So it was very hard for me to, and my team to, first of all, for me to convince my team that we're not going to fire somebody. And then my safety team going out, talking to other people, saying that, no, you're not going to be punished. We're not going to get mad with you. And we even had situations where we had to go out. I remember once where I was in a kitchen in a West Coast state and a person did something wrong. And the kitchen manager walked up and he was yelling and screaming and I was appalled. I'm like, wow, do we still treat people like this in this century? And the person that got yelled at got really sad but dependent on the salary. So they continued doing what they were doing, but in a different way. And I asked the boss afterwards why he was yelling, and he said, otherwise they don't understand. And I'm like, seriously, is that what you think? That you have to raise your voice and scream and yell for people to understand? Did you ever take the moment to ask if he really understood what he had done wrong and why it was not good and what it could have caused? And he's like, oh, they should know. If they're in my kitchen, they should know. And I'm like, yeah, but did you take the moment to ask him if he understood? And he stomped off and he got angry with me. So I walked over to the employee and I asked him, saying, do you know what you did wrong? And he's like, no, I don't. I just know that I get yelled at. And I said, has anybody ever told you why you cannot take out X amount of salmon fillets at a time? He's like, no. I said, because if you keep too many salmon fillets out, they're exposed to the wrong temperature. And when they're exposed to the wrong temperature, you then all of a sudden have bacteria growth in them. And when you have bacteria growth, you may cause foodborne illness to the customers. And he was like, why hasn't anybody told me this? And I was like, it's part of the training, but I understand it's hard to understand. How could this have been done better? He said it could have been done better if my manager had told me instead of yelling at me, because if he yells at me, then I don't know what is wrong and I make the same mistake again. And it was such a clear example to me how management thinks very often that yelling and screaming, punishing is the right way to make people do the right things, when these simple questions to this employee would have solved it. And now he will know forever.
Yeah.
That this is what you do and you don't do, and he will never make that mistake again. But being yelled at doesn't help it.
Yeah.
And I think there's way too much of that.
Yeah, exactly. You said where we are from, because we never said that. We are both from Sweden. So we have another culture with us, but you have lived in US for 30 years, isn't it?
30 years now, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I am still in Sweden, but I think in Sweden we have lost a lot of that trust in our organization. So it's more like the situation I think that you describe, unfortunately. We have lost parts of our Swedish leadership as something good. And I think another point that you had in that story is the importance of that you don't just communicate a new way of doing things, a new instruction how you should handle the salmon. You need to tell why. You need to get the meaning. It has to be meaningful for the employee. Why shouldn't I take out too many salmons at a time?
Yeah.
We need to understand.
Yeah. It's all about change management, right? If you don't understand why and how and where and when, but just what, projects and changes and transformation will fail.
Yeah.
And it was the same here. The person was yelled at. He didn't know why. He didn't know what he had done wrong, how he could have done it better. So he had no idea why he was being yelled at. He was a very ambitious person and wanted to succeed. He was very proud of his job, and he was the first person I got to know him a little bit afterwards, first person in the family that had gotten a college degree. And so he was a very proud person, and being yelled at like an animal felt hugely humiliating to him.
Yeah.
And he only wanted to do well.
Yeah. And the even more fear.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was this a situation where you understood that fear was something in the system that was really having effect on the results in your organization? Because I think that's also, how did you find out that fear was such a strong driving force in the organization?
No, that wasn't I had seen that many times before, but not perhaps put two and two together. I think the funniest example, but really shows it, is I had a wonderful executive admin for many years in this company, and she often came to me and apologized for things. And one day I looked at her, and I won't mention her name because I haven't asked if it's okay for me to mention her name, but one day I asked her, why do you apologize? And she said, because I'm making mistakes. I'm used to being yelled at and people getting angry with me. So I'm like, have you ever built a PowerPoint before? And this was a particular situation where she thought she had failed. And she's like, no. And I'm like, I must say that the PowerPoint you have built here is 10 times better than any other PowerPoint I have seen any of my team members having built. But you apologize because you come from a boss that yelled at you for everything. So we implemented this rule that unless she had caused harm to somebody or somebody had gotten killed, I know it sounds exaggerating, but unless somebody had gotten killed for an action that she had taken, she was not allowed to apologize. And it was really hard for her to change. So every time I got a message saying, I'm sorry, Martin, or please accept my apologies, my counter question was always, did somebody die? And then she came back and said, no. I'm like, okay, so then let's discuss it. But that was fear, right? She came from reporting to a person who then started to report to me. And she became my executive assistant instead of his. And she was used at being yelled at for the minor things. If she had forgotten to call somebody, or if she had forgotten to submit a paper and things like that, or if she sat in the wrong position in a conference room, in the wrong row, she was yelled at. And I'm like, wow, this is an organization. Perhaps not, I won't blame the company because the company is not responsible for it, but the people within the company, certain people. And there was a fear culture. And some departments didn't have it, some departments had it. And I inherited a department where there was a lot of fear. And I spoke with a gentleman yesterday that left the company some years ago, and he said the same thing. He said that it was such a relief when you came in and we didn't have to be scared anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm no superhero, but I don't understand this. I'm like, why do you need to be scared? Nobody dares to speak up because either they're scared of looking stupid or being laughed at or somehow being punished afterwards. And I'm not saying that that's how it is in all companies, of course, but these are experiences that I have had with many companies.
Yeah. And now it was a lot about fear, but what you did was that you saw the pattern. You have to find and see the patterns in the organization. Why do they always say like this when they make a mistake? And then you can't just say, you have to tell me everything. You have to understand, why aren't they telling me this? Why is it natural that we tell when something goes wrong? And I think that is that you can't just treat the symptoms. You have to understand the problem, and it's often much deeper than you think at the first place. And it's like when you're going to a doctor because you have a fever, the doctor will ask you, a good doctor would ask you a lot of questions to understand more about your situation, and not just saying, take some pills and go home and sleep. It will be good. Yeah. So we always have to ask. I think that's a big problem we have today. We ask too little questions in our organizations, and everyone, managers and employees, are under very high pressure. And you should just move on. You should be fast. You should just solve the problem and move on. Yeah. But that is one thing in this, to identify the invisible friction that this podcast is about questions.
Yes. And I think to that point, there's a very interesting saying that you hear very often. It is, there are no stupid questions. I hear people saying that all the time. If you say that, hey, I have a dumb question, and then people say, there are no stupid questions or dumb questions. I think that has drowned a little bit because people are not asking questions, and they think they need to have answers. But I think many times a good leader, instead of giving answers, he asks questions from his teams, how things can be done, how they can be done differently, what is working well, what is not working well. I think you and I heard it a month or 2 months ago. Somebody had taken for habit to ask their employees every day when they left work, what was making your work hard today or difficult to complete today? To get an understanding of how can I, as a leader, eliminate that hurdle for you tomorrow.
But one thing that I have experienced is that, or that I see, is that a manager should be very quick, secure, make decisions, and really point with the whole hand and be that leader that really can lead. But what we are talking about now is like the opposite. Ask questions. You also need to be prepared that the answers aren't always the answers that you want to have. They could be very inconvenient, the answers that you get. And I think, because you and I have, of course, talked a lot, and let's get into this, what have changed your mindset? Because I guess that you once in the time also was like a normal leader that wanted to have the answers and clearly lead the way forward. But how What made you start asking more questions than giving answers?
I think when I understood the difference between leader and manager, I started to ask questions, because a manager is somebody who forcefully push people forward with a, like you said, with a straight hand and has the answers for everything, while a leader is motivating you to follow, inspiring you to follow by asking questions and getting you involved. And I had a CEO in ISS in Copenhagen. His name was Jürgen Lindegaard, has retired now. He was a fantastic leader. You came into his office and he asked you 100 questions, and you had prepared PowerPoints and all different kind of things to talk about it. And he's like, nope, not interested in watching PowerPoints. I want to hear from you. And then he kept on asking questions. And he was really tricky in a positive way, because he knew where he wanted to go, but he didn't want to tell you. So he asked you questions that led you to think in a different pattern and led you to think that other things were doable. And he was a very, very inspirational person in so many ways, very humble and an extremely good leader. And I think that's where I had the big aha moment that I shouldn't, first of all, it's not really expected for me to know everything, but it's expected of me to be able to drive in a certain direction. And for that, you need to ask questions. So if you have been asked to, as an analogy, if you have been asked to drive to Washington, D.C., you just don't jump into the car and start driving. You need to ask people, what road do I take? What weather will it be? What tires do I need? Etc. When do I need to be there? Where do I need to be?
Getting to know the system.
Exactly. And you have somehow, or not you, but we, corporate world has somehow forgotten to ask those questions. There is this false belief that as soon as you become a manager, you have to know everything. And keep in mind that you and I can be peers in a company, and tomorrow they promote me because they need a manager. That doesn't mean that I all of a sudden got a bag of knowledge with it. It just means that they needed a person who can lead, and they thought I could lead. But you and I are still colleagues, right? Just because I get the different title doesn't mean that I know more or am better than you. I have just gotten more responsibility. So I need to use that responsibility in a very careful way. And I think that is where a lot of things go wrong. People are promoted. They don't understand what it means. It comes with power. And since it has power, it means that I need to yell at people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is very wrong.
Exactly. Something happens when you get that title, I think. But we are about soon to end this first episode. But first, we would like to talk a bit about something very exciting happening in the end of September.
Yes.
And it's a lot about questions. And what are we doing then, Mårten?
We are going to France. We are having a invisible friction immersion in France with a very small selected group of people. So the people that are interested will have to submit interest, and we will then make sure that we get the right group of people. If you don't get the yes, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to come. It just means that the constellation of that group was not fitting. And so we will go to France and we will ask a lot of questions. This will not be a place where we are presenting PowerPoints. We are not going to teach, preach, and coach. We're going to guide you, and we will guide you through very many ways and scenarios to help you understand. So we're really, really excited about France and for you to come.
Yeah, really. And it will be both about you as a leader, you as a person, your leadership, and the system that you lead. You will have the chance to grow in many, many ways during this week.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's not a normal event. It's not that when you leave from there, that's the last you hear from us.
No.
It will continue. We will work with you. We will not disappear.
No, exactly. And the group, the other people in this week won't disappear from you either. It will be just a start of a journey, because change take times.
Yes.
Take a long time. as you said. So let's end this first episode, and we want to leave you with one question. Which recurring problem have you been trying to solve that might actually point toward something deeper in the system? And with that, we hope you have enjoyed this first episode, and we will be back again next week with another topic.
Yes, thank you.